Good morning, everyone. As we gather in this sacred space, I invite you to take a deep breath and arrive fully in the moment, bringing with you all that makes you who you are. Your joys, your struggles, your hopes, and your questions. Today, we turn our hearts and minds to the theme of empathy, a quality that weaves us together as a community and invites us to meet one another with open minds and compassionate hearts. And I know you have compassionate hearts. As I wrote up in the blurb, we call what we put in the newsletter a blurb. Empathy is the bridge that connects us across divides. It requires deep listening and compassionate understanding in healing relationships. It also requires nurturing hope and building resilient communities, which I might say is such as yours. Empathy nurtures the spirit of renewal when we gather from our hearts into our homes, workplaces, and neighborhoods. Cultivating empathy assists us on the journey to healing and connection. Now, it may be that you're already empathic, Yet it's such an important topic that it's time every once in a while to stop and reflect on empathy. Now, I'm going to begin. I've arranged for a short 3-minute video from the research professor and storyteller, you may know her, Brené Brown, to help us move right into our subject. Brené Brown is a well-known author, and you may have read some of her really good books, and I recommend them to you if you haven't. So, time for the video.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
The short video we just watched, teaches a distinction many of us have felt in our bones. Empathy is feeling with people. Sympathy often keeps us at a safer distance. Feeling for them instead of with them. So it's really about us. It's what we're feeling for them. In her well-known illustration in this film clip, empathy climbs down into the hole with someone and says, "You're not alone." And you saw sympathy kind of stands at the top, meaning well, but staying safe. Brown's summary is simple enough to remember and strong enough to guide us. Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy actually drives disconnection. Empathy involves understanding and actually sharing another person's feelings without judgment or intervention. Empathy is the ability and willingness to understand and feel with another person's experience, and to respond in a way that communicates, "You're not alone. I'm here with you." Empathy is the bridge that allows us to move across emotional divides, allowing hearts to connect. It asks more of us than politeness and more than agreement. Empathy calls for deep listening and compassionate understanding, the kind that can help heal relationships, nurture hope, and build resilient communities. That is one of the quiet miracles of empathy. It does not require us to approve, to endorse, or solve. It simply asks us to be present enough to say, sometimes with words, sometimes without, "I'm here with you." Brené Brown teaches a distinction, as I said, that we feel. Sympathy often keeps us at a safer distance. Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. The latter comes from a distance. For instance, when we send a sympathy card, which are very appropriate, but we're sending a sympathy card. We're not there emotionally open to the other person's emotion, which is what empathy is. Empathy can be a spirit of renewal when we carry it from our hearts into our homes, workplaces, and neighborhoods. Cultivating empathy supports our journey toward healing and connection. And even if you already consider yourself empathic, it is still worth pausing from time to time to practice it intentionally, because empathy is less a personality trait than a way of living, of thinking, of feeling, of acting. Think about a moment when someone truly listened to you, not with an agenda, not with a quick fix, not with the subtle impatience of someone waiting for their turn to talk. Just listened. I'm thinking of a small scene many of us know. You finally say out loud what you've been carrying, and the other person doesn't rush to solve it. They don't make it about them. They don't give you 5 reasons you shouldn't feel that way. They simply say, steady, attentive, kind. Maybe they offer a cup of tea. Maybe they say, tell me more. And you can hear in their voice that they meant it. And in that ordinary holiness, something in you unclenches, shoulders drop, breath returns, the nervous system settles. As if you've been walking around braced for impact and suddenly realized you have no need to do that. One such experience for me was when I shared with a friend that my son and his wife were separating a few years ago. This is a friend who usually does most of the talking, yet her silent listening and in the things she asked or said, I felt free to cry. It was the first cry of the pent-up grief I was feeling. Having a friend connect in such a warm, heartfelt way with me was one of the quiet miracles of empathy. I felt the release of the pain I'd been carrying. The grief was still with me, but in a more livable way. Livable way. I could live with it better, in other words. Empathy makes room for another person's reality. It does not require us to approve, to endorse, or to solve. It simply asks us to be present enough to say, sometimes with words, sometimes without, I'm here with you. Empathy makes room always. For Unitarian Universalists, that climbing down that we saw in the video, to be with another, is not just a personal virtue. It is a communal practice. We are a covenantal tradition. We do not promise to think alike. We promise to stay in relationship. Our principles call us to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person and to practice justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships. Empathy is one of the skills, an essential skill, that makes these promises more than words on a wall. Without empathy, our commitments become slogans. With empathy, they become lived experiences. So how do we cultivate empathy in a world that trains us every day to be distractive, reactive, and certain? One place to begin is with spiritual practice as old as human community, deep listening. Not the listening that waits to correct or counter. Not the listening that scans for flaws. Deep listening is an act of attention that says, your experience matters enough for me to slow down. It is the kind of listening that honors another person's perspective as their truth, even when we don't share it. When we listen this way, we are not collecting ammunition. We are making connection. Deep listening has a humble, almost ordinary feel to it. Its questions sound like, help me understand. What was that like for you? What do you need right now? It looks like open posture, gentle eye contact, and the willingness to tolerate a little silence. So many of us just can't stand silence, but we have to. It's important. Deep listening resists the reflex to perform or to share similar experience. Oh, and that happened to me, you know? It does not rush toward the clever comeback or the uplifting lesson. And it avoids the empathic misfires so many of us learn. Minimizing, well, it could be worse. And that's what the at least does. It's minimizing. Comparing, I just said it, that happened to me too. Or fixing. I think what you should do is, those responses they're not cruel responses. They're often just our expression of discomfort, trying to escape. Worse is no response at all. As victims of cancer have reported to me that they receive when they share their diagnosis. Saying something like, oh no, I don't know what to say to that. A closer friend might add, how can I support you in this? Both are a lot more empathetic than a response of discomfort and silence. Empathy is hard for the simplest of reason. It asks us to be close to pain. Sometimes it asks us to be close to pain we don't fully understand, or pain that triggers our own. Because you can't be empathetic with someone without opening your own feelings to receive theirs. Empathy also costs something in a culture of speed. It takes time. It costs the ego's need to be right. It costs the comfort of staying in our own lane of certainty. And in an era of polarization, empathy can feel risky. If I truly listen, will I be pulled into something I can't handle? If I soften towards someone, does that mean I agree with them? If I acknowledge their humanity, does that betray my values? So let's be clear. Empathy is not the same as agreement. And compassion is not the same as permissiveness. We can hold people accountable and remain in touch with their humanity. In fact, empathy can strengthen accountability because it helps us respond to harm without turning the person who caused it into a monster. Empathy says, I will not abandon your humanity, even as I name what happened, even as I set boundaries, even if I insist on repair. The I'm sorry response. That is not weakness, that is moral maturity. I like that phrase, moral maturity. There's a reason our services repeatedly begin with our flame, our chalice lighting. In one set of words used for chalice lighting, we would hear, new love is ever waiting to break through to warm our hearts. That is what empathy can feel like when it arrives. New love breaking through, not as sentiment, but as courage. Just a little bit of an aside here. I want to say that's what gives us the ability to share our vulnerabilities, as in our sorrows, as well as our joy in joys and concerns. Okay, now I want to offer a simple illustration. Imagine two people in conflict. Partners, siblings, neighbors, members of a congregation, members of your congregation. Each convinced the other just doesn't get it. One says, "You never consider my needs." The other says, "You're always blaming me." In that kind of spiral, facts become weapons, and every sentence is a verdict. Empathy interrupts the spiral, not by deciding who is right, but by changing the question. What is the pain underneath? What fear is driving this? What longing is trying to be heard? When we ask those questions honestly, we often discover that conflict is not only about what actually happened, it's about what it meant. In congregational life, we sometimes need this kind of interruption. We are a community of many temperaments, histories, identities, and hopes. Some of us were raised to speak directly, others to speak more carefully. Some of us process out loud. If you've ever been in a meeting with me, you'll notice that I do that. Others need quiet time. Some of us old church wounds. Some of us carry old church wounds. Others are here because this community saved us when nothing else did. When we forget that complexity, we begin to treat one another as problems to manage rather than people to know. Empathy brings us back to our covenant, the promise that relationship matters enough to practice repair. Empathy also has a public dimension. It matters in how we live as neighbors and citizens, how we respond to suffering beyond our immediate circles, and how we build the beloved community our faith imagines. But here we need to name something important. Listening across difference requires humility. It requires the willingness to be taught and the willingness to be uncomfortable. It means notice the impulse to say, "I understand," even when we don't, just to get through with something. Sometimes the most honest, empathic statement is, "I can't fully know what that has been like for you, but I want to listen and learn." In these times in our country, many of us are very tired. The needs are real. The headlines are relentless. The suffering we witness near and afar can overwhelm our capacity to respond. Empathy without grounding can turn into empathy fatigue. We shut down, not because we don't care, but because we care and don't know how to hold it all. This is why empathy must include self-empathy. We need compassion for our own limits. We need practices that restore us: rest, friendship, music, prayer, meditation, time in nature, laughter, therapy. Whatever helps your spirit come back online is what you need to give yourself. Sustainable empathy is not endless emotional exposure. It's a rhythm of presence and renewal, presence and renewal like waves in and out. The practices of empathy do not require perfection. They require willingness, patience, and self-control. They require courage to slow down and open up and be emotionally present to the other person. And they require the humility to be changed by what we hear. And when we practice them, when we choose empathy again and then again, we create tiny bridges everywhere we go, between parent and child, between partners, between neighbors, between those who feel left out and those who feel unsure how to welcome one. These bridges do not erase differences. They simply make it possible to cross to connection. May we be people who listen deeply. May we be brave enough to feel with one another and wise enough to pair compassion with accountability. And may we listen to the blessing of the poet John O'Donohue for one who holds power. He offers it to all of us who carry influence in someone else's life: parent, partner, friend, supervisor, neighbor, and another congregant member. So I'm going to close with it today. A Blessing for One Who Holds Power by John O'Donohue. May the gift of leadership awaken in you as vocation. Keep you mindful of the providence that calls us to serve. As high over the mountains the eagle spreads its wings, may your perspective be larger than the view from the foothills. When the way is flat and dull in times of gray endurance, may your imagination continue to evoke horizons. When thirst burns in times of drought, may you be blessed to find the wells. May you have the wisdom to read time clearly, and when the seeds of change will flourish. In your heart, may there be a sanctuary for the stillness where clarity is born. May your work be infused with passion and creativity, and have the wisdom to balance compassion and challenge. May your soul find the graciousness to rise above the fester of small mediocrities. May your power never become a shell wherein your heart would silently atrophy. This one's hard. May you welcome your own vulnerability as the ground where healing and truth join. May integrity of soul be your first ideal, the source that will guide and will bless you. Blessed be. Amen. The divine in me bows to the divine in you.